The advanced tactical training facility at Fort Meridian had witnessed countless moments that would break ordinary people. Grueling selections, impossible tests, the forging of America's deadliest operators. But nothing in its 30-year history had prepared the assembled crowd for what was about to unfold. Nothing that would make seasoned special operations veterans question everything they thought they knew about legends walking among them. Lieutenant Zara Kane stood in the center of the converted warehouse that served as the facility's main briefing hall, surrounded by 200 of the most elite warriors the military had ever produced. Green Berets, Army Rangers, Delta Force operators, and Navy SEALs, men and women who had bled in the mountains of Afghanistan, the deserts of Iraq, and the jungles of South America. Warriors who spoke in the unspoken language of shared sacrifice, who had earned their place through pain that would shatter civilians. Every single one of them was staring at her with a mixture of curiosity, skepticism, and barely concealed hostility. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. At 28 years old, Zara appeared almost fragile in her crisp digital camouflage utilities. 5 feet 4 inches, 125 pounds, with auburn hair pulled back in a regulation bun and green eyes that seemed too calm for someone facing this level of scrutiny. She stood with perfect military bearing, hands clasped behind her back, spine straight as a flagpole. But there was something else in her posture, a stillness that spoke of coiled potential, like a predator at rest. The morning's assessment had been anything but routine. What was supposed to be a standard evaluation for the Joint Special Operations Command's new integrated training program had turned into something far more intense. The male operators had pushed her harder than any recruit in recent memory, testing not just her physical capabilities but her mental resilience, looking for the breaking point that would prove their assumptions correct. They had run her through obstacle courses designed for operators 50 pounds heavier, made her carry equipment loads that should have crushed someone her size, subjected her to psychological pressure that had broken seasoned veterans. For 6 straight hours, they had thrown everything they could at her, waiting for her to crack, to quit, to prove that she was just another diversity initiative gone wrong. She hadn't broken, hadn't even bent. Now, as the late afternoon sun streamed through the warehouse's high windows, casting long shadows across the concrete floor, the tension in the room was thick enough to taste. The formal evaluation was over, but something else was beginning, something that would test far more than physical endurance or tactical knowledge. Standing near the equipment racks, Master Sergeant Rex Dunham watched Zara with the calculating gaze of a man who had spent 15 years separating the worthy from the pretenders. 6'2", 230 pounds of muscle and scar tissue, with arms like tree trunks and a face that looked like it had been carved from granite by an angry sculptor. He had earned his reputation in the chaos of Mogadishu, refined it in the mountains of Afghanistan, and perfected it in the classified operations that didn't officially exist. Dunham had trained hundreds of operators over his career, had seen the best and worst that America's military could produce. He knew strength when he saw it, could smell fear from across a room, could identify weakness with the precision of a surgeon. And everything about Lieutenant Kane bothered him. She was too composed, too controlled, too perfect. Outstanding performance today, Lieutenant. Dunham's voice carried across the warehouse like the rumble of distant thunder. He pushed away from the equipment rack and began walking toward her, his boots echoing against the concrete. Really impressive stuff. Top-tier physical fitness, solid tactical understanding, textbook execution under pressure. Zara didn't respond, just tracked his approach with those unsettling green eyes, waiting. But here's what I can't figure out, Dunham continued, stopping about 10 feet away from her. The warehouse had gone completely silent. Even the maintenance crews had stopped what they were doing to watch. Your record shows you're coming to us from the 82nd Airborne. Good unit. Solid soldiers. But nothing that would explain. He gestured vaguely at her. The way you moved today. The way you handled stress. The way you carried a 200-pound pack like it was a day hike. Around the warehouse, other operators began to drift closer. Captain Jake Morrison from Delta Force, a compact man with predator's eyes and 17 confirmed kills. Staff Sergeant Amy Rodriguez from the Green Berets, one of only 12 women to complete the Special Forces qualification course. Chief Petty Officer Tom Bradley from SEAL Team 7, whose reputation for psychological warfare was legendary even among special operations units. They formed a loose circle around Zara and Dunham, close enough to intervene if things went sideways, far enough back to let this play out naturally. This wasn't official, wasn't sanctioned, but it was necessary. They all knew it. See Lieutenant Kane. Dunham's voice got quieter, which somehow made it more menacing. We've all been in this business long enough to recognize certain patterns. The way someone moves when they've been under fire. The way they breathe when they're managing fear. The way they carry themselves when they've earned the right. He took another step closer. Zara still hadn't moved. And you, ma'am, move like someone who's seen the elephant. Move like someone who's been places and done things that your service record doesn't reflect. Move like someone who's earned a respect that your rank doesn't justify. The silence stretched out for long seconds. Somewhere in the distance, a helicopter was landing, its rotors beating a steady rhythm that seemed to match the tension in the room. Now, that makes me curious, Dunham continued. Makes me wonder who you really are, Lieutenant. Makes me wonder what you're not telling us. Because in my experience, when someone's this good and their paperwork doesn't explain why. He let the sentence hang in the air like smoke. Chief Bradley spoke up from his position near the wall. Could be she's just naturally gifted. Some people are born to this life. His voice carried the slight rasp of someone who'd spent too many years breathing desert sand and gun smoke. Could be, Dunham agreed. But my gut says different. My gut says we're looking at someone with operational experience that officially never happened. Someone who's been places and done things that require clearances we don't have. Captain Morrison stepped forward slightly. What exactly are you suggesting, Master Sergeant? Dunham never took his eyes off Zara. I'm suggesting that maybe Lieutenant Kane here isn't quite the fresh-faced paratrooper her jacket says she is. Maybe she's something else entirely. Something that would explain why the Pentagon is suddenly very interested in having her evaluated for JSOC programs. The room held its breath. This was the moment. The point where everything would either escalate or defuse, where careers could be made or destroyed, where the carefully maintained order of military hierarchy would either hold or shatter like glass. Zara Kane stood perfectly still in the center of it all, surrounded by America's most dangerous operators, facing questions that could expose secrets buried so deep that acknowledging them could compromise national security. Her personnel file listed her as just another Army lieutenant seeking advancement. But her eyes held the weight of operations that had never been officially acknowledged, of missions that existed only in the memories of those who had carried them out. In 30 seconds, everything was about to change. The silence stretched on for another heartbeat before Zara Kane finally spoke, her voice carrying the quiet authority of someone accustomed to command in the most dangerous places on Earth. Master Sergeant Dunham, she said, her tone respectful but unwavering. My service record accurately reflects my time with the 82nd Airborne Division. 3 deployments, commendable performance reviews, standard progression through the ranks. She paused, letting her words settle. Is there something specific about my performance today that concerns you? Dunham's weathered face creased into what might have been a smile on anyone else. On him, it looked predatory. Concerns me? No, ma'am. What concerns me is perfection where it shouldn't exist. What concerns me is watching someone navigate our most challenging course like they'd run it before, when I know for a fact they haven't. Around them, the circle of operators had grown tighter. Word was spreading through the facility like wildfire. Training had officially stopped as personnel found excuses to drift toward the warehouse. Even Colonel Patricia Hayes, the facility's commanding officer, had appeared near the entrance, her arms crossed as she observed the developing situation with the sharp eyes of someone who'd seen enough politics to know when something was about to explode. Chief Bradley pushed off from the wall where he'd been leaning. I've been watching her all day, he said, his voice carrying the particular authority that came with 7 combat deployments and a chest full of decorations that most people would never see. The way she handled the close quarters battle course. The way she moved through the kill house. That wasn't beginner's luck, and it sure as hell wasn't something you learned jumping out of airplanes with the 82nd. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez nodded in agreement. The stress inoculation exercise, she added. We put her through a scenario that breaks seasoned operators. Simulated capture, interrogation resistance, the works. She didn't just survive it, she controlled it. Turned the tables on her interrogators twice. Captain Morrison stepped forward, his movements precise and economical. What really got my attention was the maritime insertion exercise. We threw that at her as a curveball. Figured someone from an airborne unit would struggle with the water work. He looked directly at Zara. Instead, she moved through that underwater obstacle course like a fish. Better technique than half the SEALs I know. Zara maintained her position at the center of the growing crowd, her expression neutral but alert. She could feel the weight of their scrutiny, the way their trained eyes were cataloging every micro-expression, every shift in posture, looking for tells that would reveal the truth behind her carefully constructed cover. Perhaps, she said carefully, I'm simply well-trained. The Army invests considerable resources in preparing its officers for diverse operational environments. Master Sergeant Dunham laughed, but there was no humor in it. Ma'am, with all due respect, I've trained thousands of soldiers over the past 15 years. I know what Army training produces. This isn't it. He began walking slowly around her, forcing her to track his movement. The way you handled your weapon during the marksmanship trials. 11 targets, 11 headshots under stress in low light conditions. That's not standard Army marksmanship. That's precision shooting at a level that takes years to develop. Chief Bradley joined in. The hand-to-hand combat assessment. We put you against Sergeant Collins, 6'4", 250 pounds, former MMA fighter, instructor at the Ranger School. You put him down in 47 seconds using techniques I've only seen in very specific communities. The crowd was getting larger now. Word had spread beyond the immediate training area. Off-duty personnel were appearing, drawn by the electric tension that filled the air when something significant was about to break. The afternoon sun slanted through the warehouse windows, casting everything in harsh relief. Colonel Hayes finally stepped forward from her position near the entrance. That's enough, she said, her voice cutting through the murmur of voices like a blade. Master Sergeant Dunham, I believe you've made your point. But Dunham wasn't finished. His instincts, honed by 15 years of combat operations, were screaming that something was wrong. Something was off about Lieutenant Kane, and in his world, anomalies got people killed. One more thing, Colonel, he said, never taking his eyes off Zara. The psychological evaluation. Dr. Martinez ran her through the standard battery of tests designed to assess stress tolerance, decision-making under pressure, leadership potential. He paused. The results came back with a notation I've only seen 3 times in my career. The warehouse went completely silent. The evaluation indicated that Lieutenant Kane possesses psychological resilience and operational decision-making capabilities consistent with someone who has extensive experience in direct action operations. The kind of experience that, according to her service record, she shouldn't have. Captain Morrison's eyes narrowed. What kind of notation? The kind that gets flagged by JSOC psychological profiles. The kind that indicates someone has been exposed to operational stress levels that only exist in the most classified corners of special operations. Zara felt the noose tightening around her carefully constructed identity. Every instinct told her to maintain her cover, to stick to her story, to weather the storm and emerge intact. But she could see the calculation in their eyes, the way they were processing information, connecting dots that shouldn't connect. These weren't regular soldiers. These were operators, the best America had to offer, and they were closing in on a truth that could unravel everything. Colonel Hayes stepped closer, her voice dropping to a level that only those in the immediate circle could hear. Lieutenant Kane, I'm going to ask you a direct question, and I need a direct answer. Is there anything about your background, your training, or your experience that you haven't disclosed in your personnel file? The moment hung suspended like a drop of water about to fall. Around them, 200 Special Operations personnel waited for an answer, that would either confirm their suspicions or force them to accept that they were witnessing something unprecedented. Zara looked around the circle of faces, hardened warriors who had earned their skepticism through blood and sacrifice. She could maintain her cover, could stick to her story, could let them think what they wanted while never confirming their suspicions. Or she could tell them the truth that would change everything. Her mind flashed to the classified operations that officially never happened, to the missions that existed only in the memories of those who had carried them out, to the years of service that had been erased from official records to protect national security interests, to the legend that she had become in the shadows, known only to a select few who operated in the darkest corners of America's war on terror. The warehouse held its breath as Lieutenant Zara Kane prepared to either maintain the lie that protected everything or reveal the truth that would shatter their understanding of who she really was. The tension in the warehouse was suffocating. 200 Special Operations personnel stood motionless, their collective breathing the only sound as they waited for Lieutenant Zara Kane's response. The afternoon sun had shifted, casting longer shadows across the concrete floor, and the air itself seemed to crackle with anticipation. But before Zara could answer Colonel Hayes' question, a new voice cut through the silence like a knife through silk. Well, look what we have here." Every head turned toward the warehouse entrance where a figure stood silhouetted against the bright afternoon light. As he stepped inside, the assembled operators could see him clearly. A man in his early 40s with prematurely silver hair, wearing the dress uniform of a Navy commander. His chest bore ribbons that told a story of classified operations and commendations that most people would never understand. But it was his eyes that commanded attention. Ice blue, calculating, with the 1,000-yard stare that came from seeing too much death in too many dark places. Commander Dylan Cross walked into the warehouse with the easy confidence of someone who owned whatever room he entered. His polished dress shoes clicked against the concrete as he made his way toward the circle of operators surrounding Zara Kane. "Commander Cross," Colonel Hayes said, her voice tight with surprise and something that might have been concern. "What brings you to Fort Meridian?" Cross smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Routine inspection, Colonel. Making sure our joint training programs are meeting Navy standards." His gaze swept across the assembled personnel before settling on Zara. "Though it seems I've arrived at an interesting moment." Master Sergeant Dunham stepped forward slightly. "Sir, we were just conducting a post-exercise evaluation." "Were you?" Cross interrupted, his voice carrying the authority that came with 20 years in naval special warfare. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks more like an interrogation, and a rather unprofessional one at that." The warehouse had gone completely silent. Even the distant sounds of helicopter operations seemed muted. Cross began walking slowly around the circle of operators, his presence commanding their attention despite their higher numbers. "Master Sergeant Dunham," Cross said, never breaking stride. "Impressive career. Mogadishu, Afghanistan, multiple classified operations in the Horn of Africa. The kind of resume that earns respect." He paused directly in front of Dunham. "But also the kind of career that should teach a man when to ask questions and when to keep his mouth shut." Dunham's jaw tightened, but he maintained his military bearing. "Sir, if Lieutenant Kane has nothing to hide..." "Nothing to hide?" Cross's laugh was cold. "Master Sergeant, do you have any idea how many operations you've participated in that officially never happened? How many missions exist only in the memories of those who carried them out?" He gestured around the room. "Every person in this warehouse has secrets, classified operations, buried missions, things they can never discuss, not even with their families." Chief Bradley spoke up from his position near the wall. "Commander, with respect, this is about operational security. About making sure we know who we're training with." Cross turned to face him and Bradley actually took a step back. "Operational security, Chief? Really? Because from where I'm standing, this looks more like a witch hunt. A group of operators who can't accept that someone might be better than they expected." Captain Morrison stepped forward. "Sir, the psychological profile indicated..." "The psychological profile," Cross interrupted, "indicated exactly what it was supposed to indicate. that Lieutenant Kane possesses the mental resilience and operational experience necessary for the mission she's been assigned to. Nothing more, nothing less. The crowd began to shift uncomfortably. Cross's presence had changed the entire dynamic of the situation. What had been building toward a confrontation was now becoming something else entirely. "You see, gentlemen and ladies," Cross continued, his voice taking on the tone of someone delivering a lecture. "The problem with special operations personnel is that you become so accustomed to secrets that you start seeing conspiracies everywhere. You start thinking that every anomaly must have a sinister explanation." He walked over to where Zara stood, still maintaining her position at the center of the circle. Sometimes the simplest explanation is the correct one. Sometimes a soldier is simply exceptional. Sometimes natural talent combined with intensive training produces results that seem impossible to those who haven't achieved them. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez crossed her arms. "Commander, I've been in special operations for 8 years. I know the difference between natural talent and operational experience." "Do you?" Cross turned to face her. "Because I'm looking at a woman who completed the Special Forces qualification course when less than 1% of candidates succeed. By your logic, that should be impossible. Yet here you are." He smiled coldly. "Perhaps you're not who your service record says you are either." The comment hit home. Rodriguez's face flushed, but she said nothing. Cross walked back toward the center of the circle, positioning himself next to Zara. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to tell you something that should end this conversation permanently. Lieutenant Kane's performance today wasn't surprising to those of us who recommended her for this program. Her results weren't anomalous. They were exactly what we expected." Master Sergeant Dunham frowned. "Expected based on what, sir?" "Based on her performance in previous evaluations that you don't have clearance to know about," Cross said flatly. "Based on operations she's participated in that exist at classification levels beyond your access. Based on training she's received in programs that officially don't exist." The warehouse erupted in murmurs. Cross held up a hand for silence. "Now, before any of you get excited, let me be clear about something. I'm not confirming or denying any specific operations. I'm not revealing classified information. I'm simply telling you that your assumptions about Lieutenant Kane's background are based on incomplete information." Colonel Hayes stepped forward. "Commander, if Lieutenant Kane has additional training or experience that's relevant to her evaluation." "Colonel, some things exist on a need-to-know basis. And at this moment, in this room, none of you need to know anything beyond what you've already observed." Cross's voice carried absolute finality. "Lieutenant Kane performed exceptionally today because she is exceptional. That's all the explanation you're going to get." The crowd began to stir restlessly. They had come expecting answers and were being given official silence. But Cross wasn't finished. "However," he continued, his voice rising slightly to command attention, "since there seems to be some question about Lieutenant Kane's qualifications, I think a demonstration is in order. A way to settle this matter once and for all." Chief Bradley leaned forward. "What kind of demonstration?" Cross smiled, and this time it reached his eyes, though it wasn't particularly warm. "The kind that will either prove Lieutenant Kane belongs here or prove that you're all correct to be suspicious. The kind that will test everything she claims to be against everything you believe she isn't." He turned to face Zara directly. "Lieutenant Kane, are you prepared to undergo additional evaluation to satisfy the concerns of your fellow operators?" Zara looked around the circle of faces surrounding her. She could see the calculation in their eyes, the way they were weighing Cross's words against their own observations. They weren't satisfied, weren't convinced. They wanted proof one way or another. "What kind of evaluation, sir?" she asked. Cross's smile widened. "The kind that will require you to demonstrate every skill you've claimed to possess, under conditions that will push you beyond anything you've experienced today, in front of witnesses who will be able to judge your true capabilities." The warehouse went silent again. Everyone understood what was being proposed. Not just another test, but a crucible. A trial by fire that would either validate Lieutenant Kane's extraordinary performance or expose her as something other than what her service record claimed. "When?" Zara asked quietly. Tomorrow morning, 0600 hours. Full evaluation, complete documentation, independent observers. Cross looked around the circle of operators. And anyone who wants answers can come watch and judge for themselves. Master Sergeant Dunham nodded slowly. What will this evaluation consist of, sir? Cross turned to face him, and his expression became deadly serious. Everything, Master Sergeant. Absolutely everything. The next morning arrived with the gray pre-dawn light that military personnel knew all too well. Fort Meridian's training facility buzzed with an energy that had nothing to do with the regular training schedule. Word had spread through the base like wildfire. The mysterious Lieutenant Kane was going to face an evaluation unlike anything the facility had ever conducted. By 0530 hours, nearly 300 personnel had gathered around the main training complex. Not just the special operations community that had witnessed yesterday's confrontation, but Marines from the nearby base, Air Force Special Tactics personnel, and even some Pentagon officials who had arrived on the first flight out of Washington. Everyone wanted to see what Commander Cross had planned for Lieutenant Zara Kane. The evaluation course that had been constructed overnight was unlike anything the facility had ever seen. It sprawled across 12 acres of the base's most challenging terrain, incorporating elements from every special operations discipline known to the American military. Water obstacles, urban warfare scenarios, precision shooting ranges, psychological stress chambers, and equipment that most of the assembled personnel had never seen before. Master Sergeant Dunham stood near the starting point, checking his watch as the last of the observers took their positions. Around him, the operators who had challenged Kane's credentials yesterday maintained their skeptical expressions. But there was something else in their eyes now. Curiosity mixed with anticipation. They were about to get answers one way or another. Chief Bradley joined Dunham near the equipment tables. 12 hours to build all this, he said, gesturing at the complex course layout. Cross must have called in some serious favors. Or serious threats, Captain Morrison added, approaching from the communications station where he'd been monitoring the test frequencies. Half this equipment came from programs I didn't know existed. The kind of gear that doesn't show up in standard requisitions. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez emerged from the medical station, where she'd been reviewing the safety protocols with the on-site corpsmen. The psychological stress components alone would normally require months of planning and approval. Whatever Cross is trying to prove, he's got backing from very high up the chain. At exactly 0600 hours, Commander Cross appeared at the starting line, flanked by two officers that none of the Fort Meridian personnel recognized. One wore the uniform of an Army colonel with Special Operations Command patches. The other was Navy, a captain with ribbons that spoke of classified operations in forgotten corners of the world. Cross addressed the assembled crowd through a wireless microphone, his voice carrying clearly across the training area. Ladies and gentlemen, what you're about to witness is a comprehensive evaluation designed to test every aspect of special operations capability. The course you see before you has been constructed to standards that exceed those used for our most elite units. He gestured toward the complex obstacle network. Phase 1 will test physical capabilities under extreme stress. Phase 2 will evaluate tactical decision-making in dynamic scenarios. Phase 3 will assess technical skills under pressure. Phase 4 will examine psychological resilience during simulated capture and interrogation. Phase 5 will require the integration of all skills in a mission-critical scenario. The crowd stirred restlessly. What Cross was describing wasn't just an evaluation. It was a trial that would push even the most experienced operators to their absolute limits. The evaluation will be conducted under full documentation, with independent observers from multiple commands. Every action, every decision, every result will be recorded and verified. Cross's voice carried absolute authority. At the conclusion, there will be no questions about Lieutenant Kane's capabilities. The results will speak for themselves. Master Sergeant Dunham raised his hand. Sir, what are the performance standards? How do we measure success or failure? Cross smiled, and it wasn't entirely pleasant. Master Sergeant, Lieutenant Kane will be evaluated against the standards established for Tier 1 Special Operations units, not the standards for regular Army personnel. Not the standards for conventional special operations forces. The standards reserved for operators who exist in the deepest shadows of American military capability. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Tier 1 standards were classified, known only to those who had achieved them. Most of the assembled personnel had never even been exposed to evaluations at that level. Colonel Hayes stepped forward from her position near the command post. Commander Cross, I need to understand the authority under which this evaluation is being conducted. My facility, my personnel. Colonel, Cross interrupted. This evaluation is being conducted under the authority of the Secretary of Defense, with oversight from the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Your facility has been temporarily redesignated as a classified test site. All personnel present have been cleared for this specific operation. The implications hit the crowd like a physical blow. This wasn't just about settling questions regarding one lieutenant's background. This was an official evaluation with ramifications that extended far beyond Fort Meridian. At 0615 hours, Lieutenant Zara Kane appeared at the starting line. She wore standard-issue battle dress utilities with no insignia except her name tape and rank. Her equipment loadout was minimal, basic tactical gear, a sidearm, and whatever she would acquire during the course itself. But there was something different about her demeanor. Yesterday's careful composure had been replaced by something harder, more focused. The mask of the regular Army officer was beginning to slip, revealing something underneath that made the watching operators unconsciously straighten their postures. Cross approached her, speaking quietly enough that the microphones couldn't pick up his words. Last chance to walk away, Lieutenant. Once this starts, there's no going back. No maintaining plausible deniability. Everyone here is going to know exactly who and what you are. Zara looked out at the sea of faces surrounding the course. Hundreds of America's most elite warriors, all waiting to see if she was who her performance suggested or merely an imposter who had gotten lucky. I understand, sir. Do you? Cross's voice carried a note of warning. Because once they see what you're really capable of, your quiet career in the shadows is over. You become a symbol, a recruiting poster, a target for every enemy agency that wants to prove they can take down America's best. For the first time since arriving at Fort Meridian, Zara Kane smiled. It was a cold expression, with no warmth or humor. Commander, I've been a target since I was 18 years old. The only difference is that now I won't have to pretend otherwise. Cross nodded and stepped back. Phase 1 begins in 60 seconds. You'll have 4 hours to complete all 5 phases. Time starts when you cross the first obstacle. The crowd pressed closer to the barrier lines. Every eye focused on the woman standing at the starting point. In 60 seconds, they would begin to get answers to questions that had plagued them since yesterday's demonstration. They would learn whether Lieutenant Kane was an exceptionally talented regular officer or something far more dangerous. Chief Bradley checked his stopwatch. 30 seconds. Captain Morrison adjusted his binoculars. Whatever happens, this is going to be one hell of a show. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez found herself holding her breath. 10 seconds. Cross raised his hand, holding it steady as the final seconds ticked away. The entire training facility had gone completely silent. 300 personnel waiting for a signal that would either validate their suspicions or force them to accept that they had witnessed something unprecedented. Begin, Cross said, dropping his hand. Lieutenant Zara Kane exploded into motion, and within the first 5 seconds of movement, every operator watching knew that everything they thought they understood about her was wrong. This wasn't the cautious competence of a talented regular officer. This was the fluid, lethal efficiency of someone who had been operating at the highest levels of special warfare for longer than her official service record indicated was possible. The legend they had suspected was about to be revealed in all its devastating glory, and there would be no going back. The first obstacle was a water entry point, a 40-foot tower overlooking a dark pool designed to simulate maritime insertion under hostile conditions. Most operators approached such challenges with calculated caution, testing equipment, checking depths, planning their descent carefully. Zara Kane didn't hesitate for a millisecond. She hit the platform at a dead sprint and launched herself into space without breaking stride, her body forming a perfect streamlined entry that cut through the water's surface like a knife. The splash was minimal, the kind of controlled entry that took years of practice to master. She disappeared beneath the surface and didn't emerge for nearly 2 minutes, during which the assembled observers began to murmur nervously. Chief Bradley had his binoculars trained on the water. "Jesus Christ! Where is she?" His question was answered when Kane erupted from the pool at the far end, having covered the entire 100-meter underwater distance in a single breath. She rolled onto the concrete deck with fluid grace, already drawing her sidearm as she transitioned to the next phase without pause. "Holy shit," Captain Morrison whispered. "That's not Army training. That's not any training I've ever seen." The urban warfare simulation began immediately. Moving targets, pop-up threats, civilian scenarios designed to test split-second decision-making under extreme stress. The course had been programmed with algorithms that adapted to the operator's responses, becoming more difficult as competency was demonstrated. Kane moved through the mock urban environment like smoke given form. Her weapon handling was beyond exceptional, it was surgical. Every shot was precisely placed, every movement economical and purposeful. When hostile targets appeared, she engaged them with the kind of speed and accuracy that suggested supernatural reflexes. When civilian scenarios materialized, she demonstrated restraint and tactical awareness that spoke to extensive experience in populated areas. Master Sergeant Dunham found himself unconsciously counting her shots. 47 rounds fired. 47 targets neutralized. No misses. No hesitation. No wasted motion. But it wasn't just her marksmanship that was drawing attention. It was the way she moved, flowing from position to position with a grace that suggested she could see threats before they materialized. When an explosive device was triggered remotely as she passed a doorway, she was already diving to safety before the detonation, as if she had sensed the danger through some sixth sense. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez grabbed Colonel Hayes' arm. "Ma'am, that's not normal human reaction time." She was moving before the trigger was activated. The third phase incorporated technical skills: electronics, demolitions, communications, medical procedures. Equipment was scattered throughout a complex obstacle course, requiring operators to demonstrate proficiency while under physical and psychological stress. Kane approached a complex electronic lock that typically required 15 minutes for trained specialists to defeat. She had it open in 47 seconds. A demolition scenario that normally took 30 minutes of careful preparation was completed in 8. When she reached the medical station, she treated a simulated sucking chest wound with the kind of speed and competence that suggested extensive field experience treating real casualties under fire. The watching medical personnel were stunned. "She's performing procedures that aren't taught outside advanced special operations medical courses," one of the corpsmen told Colonel Hayes. "Techniques that take years to master." The fourth phase was psychological evaluation under extreme stress, simulated capture, interrogation resistance, decision-making while subjected to disorientation techniques. The facility's psychological operations specialists had designed scenarios that broke seasoned veterans within minutes. Kane endured 43 minutes of intensive psychological pressure without giving up anything beyond name, rank, and serial number. When her interrogators employed advanced techniques, sensory deprivation, temporal disorientation, stress positions, she not only resisted but began turning the tables, using counter-interrogation methods that suggested she had received training from the most classified corners of the intelligence community. Dr. Sarah Martinez, the facility's chief psychologist, was monitoring the session from the observation room. "This is unprecedented," she told Commander Cross. "She's not just resisting interrogation, she's controlling it. She's using techniques I've only read about in classified studies from survival, evasion, resistance, and escape programs that officially don't exist." The final phase was the integration test, a mission scenario that required all skills demonstrated in the previous phases to be employed simultaneously. A mock hostage rescue operation in a multi-story building, with live role players, simulated casualties, time pressure, and mission parameters that changed dynamically based on the operator's decisions. Kane received her briefing. 12 hostages, unknown number of hostiles, building rigged with explosives, 30-minute time limit before backup arrived. Standard protocol called for waiting for support, establishing perimeter, conducting reconnaissance before entry. She ignored standard protocol entirely. Kane approached the building like she had done this exact mission dozens of times before. Her initial breach was textbook perfect, explosive charge placed with surgical precision, entry executed with the kind of fluid violence that spoke to extensive direct action experience. She moved through the building's corridors like she could see through walls, anticipating threats, bypassing obstacles, locating hostages with an efficiency that bordered on supernatural. The opposition force, seasoned special operations personnel playing hostiles, found themselves systematically neutralized by an opponent who seemed to know their positions before they took them. Kane employed tactics that weren't taught in any standard course, demonstrating knowledge of advanced special operations techniques that required years of classified training to master. When she reached the final room where the high-value hostages were being held, she faced a scenario designed to be unsolvable. Multiple hostiles, human shields, explosive devices on timers, impossible shot angles. The kind of situation where even the best operators were forced to make devastating compromises. Kane solved it in 17 seconds. The explosive breach was perfectly calculated, stunning the hostiles without injuring civilians. Her shooting was so precise that she engaged multiple targets simultaneously while moving, placing rounds with surgical accuracy while protecting innocent role players. She disarmed the explosive devices while providing medical treatment to wounded hostages, coordinating her own extraction while maintaining situational awareness that encompassed every element of the complex scenario. When the exercise concluded, the entire facility was dead silent. Kane stood in the aftermath of the exercise, her uniform showing minimal signs of the intensive evaluation she had just completed. Her breathing was controlled, her posture relaxed, her expression calm. She looked like someone who had just completed a routine training exercise rather than an evaluation that would have challenged the most elite operators in the American military. Commander Cross approached with his stopwatch and clipboard. Time to completion: 3 hours, 14 minutes, 37 seconds. Mission parameters: exceeded in every category. He looked up from his notes. Lieutenant Kane, you've just demonstrated proficiency at levels that officially don't exist in the American military. The crowd of observers pressed closer, their faces showing mixtures of awe, confusion, and dawning comprehension. What they had witnessed wasn't possible for a regular Army officer with 3 years of service. It wasn't possible for most special operations personnel with decades of experience. Master Sergeant Dunham was the first to speak. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "I owe you an apology." Chief Bradley stepped forward. "We all do. Whatever we thought we knew about your background, we were wrong." Captain Morrison nodded. "The question now is, who are you really?" Kane looked around at the faces surrounding her. America's most elite warriors, all waiting for answers that would explain what they had just witnessed. The evaluation was over, but the real test was just beginning. The test of whether she was ready to step out of the shadows and become the symbol that Commander Cross had warned her about. The legend was no longer hidden. Now came the consequences. Commander Cross stepped forward, his expression shifting from professional satisfaction to something far more serious. The assembled crowd fell silent as he raised his hand for attention, the weight of what they had just witnessed settling over the facility like a heavy blanket. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "Ladies and gentlemen," Cross announced, his voice carrying across the training area with absolute authority. "What you have just observed is classified at the highest levels of national security. Before we proceed any further, I need to make something absolutely clear." He gestured to the officers flanking him, the Army colonel and Navy captain who had arrived with him that morning. Colonel Rebecca Ashford, Special Operations Command. Captain James Walsh, Naval Special Warfare Development Group. They are here as official witnesses to what is about to be disclosed. Colonel Ashford stepped forward, her voice crisp and commanding. "By the authority vested in me by the Secretary of Defense, this facility is now operating under Special Access Program protocols. What is discussed here does not leave here. What you see here does not get reported through normal channels. Violation of these protocols will result in immediate court-martial and prosecution under the Espionage Act. The gravity of her words hit the assembled personnel like a physical blow. Special access programs were reserved for operations so classified that their very existence was denied by the government. The fact that such protocols were being invoked at a routine training facility meant that they were about to learn something that could fundamentally alter their understanding of American special operations. Captain Walsh activated a secure tablet and began reading from it. Lieutenant Zara Kane, serial number, classified. Current assignment, classified. Previous assignments, classified under Special Access Program Blackout 7. He looked up at the crowd. What I can tell you is this. For the past 7 years, Lieutenant Kane has been operating under deep cover as part of a program that officially does not exist. Master Sergeant Dunham found his voice first. Sir, are you saying she's been undercover this entire time? That her assignment to the 82nd Airborne was fabricated? Master Sergeant, Captain Walsh replied, I'm saying that Lieutenant Kane's official service record reflects what the Department of Defense needs the world to believe about her background. The truth is far more complex. Commander Cross took over, his voice measured but carrying undertones that suggested he was choosing his words very carefully. In 2018, the Department of Defense initiated a classified program designed to identify and develop operators capable of functioning at levels beyond conventional special operations. The program recruited individuals who demonstrated exceptional potential and subjected them to training regimens that pushed the boundaries of human capability. He gestured toward Kane, who stood silently at the center of the growing circle of personnel. Lieutenant Kane was one of 12 individuals selected for this program. Over the past 7 years, she has completed training courses that combine elements from every special operations discipline, enhanced by techniques developed specifically for this program. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez stepped forward. What kind of training, sir? Colonel Ashford consulted her tablet before responding. Physical conditioning that exceeds normal human parameters through classified medical enhancement protocols. Psychological conditioning that allows for extended deep cover operations in hostile territory. Technical training in disciplines that span every aspect of modern warfare and intelligence gathering. The implications were staggering. What they were describing wasn't just advanced military training, it was something that approached the realm of science fiction. Captain Morrison raised his hand. Sir, you're describing capabilities that sound almost superhuman. How is that possible within existing medical and training frameworks? Captain Walsh exchanged glances with his colleagues before responding. Captain, there are aspects of human potential that have only recently become understood through classified research programs. When you combine optimal genetic markers, advanced pharmaceutical enhancement, cutting-edge psychological conditioning, and training methods that have never been attempted outside of laboratory environments, you can achieve results that seem impossible to those operating under conventional parameters. Chief Bradley's voice carried a note of skepticism. And Lieutenant Kane has been operating under this enhanced capacity for 7 years without anyone knowing? Chief, Commander Cross replied. Lieutenant Kane has been operating in environments and conducting missions that would have been impossible for conventional operators. Her official assignment to the 82nd Airborne was cover for operations that required her to maintain a normal military profile while conducting activities that cannot be acknowledged by the United States government. The crowd was struggling to process what they were hearing. The woman they had challenged as potentially fraudulent was actually operating at levels of capability that exceeded anything in the known special operations community. Colonel Hayes stepped forward, her voice tight with concern. Commander, if Lieutenant Kane possesses these capabilities, why was she sent to my facility for evaluation? Why expose her to potential compromise? Cross's expression became grim. Because the program that created Lieutenant Kane has been compromised. 3 weeks ago, we discovered that hostile intelligence services have identified several operators from her program. 2 have been eliminated in what appeared to be training accidents. 1 has disappeared entirely. The assembled personnel exchanged worried glances. If America's most advanced operators were being targeted by foreign agencies, the implications for national security were enormous. Lieutenant Kane's cover identity was blown during a mission in Eastern Europe 6 months ago. Captain Walsh continued. Her extraction was complicated. The decision was made to transition her to a new operational status, one that would allow her to operate more openly while maintaining appropriate security protocols. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez looked directly at Kane. Ma'am, how many missions have you conducted that we'll never know about? For the first time since the evaluation began, Kane spoke. Her voice was calm, professional, but carried undertones that suggested depths of experience that most of the assembled personnel couldn't comprehend. Sergeant, over the past 7 years, I have conducted operations on every continent except Antarctica. I have eliminated targets that posed threats to American interests, gathered intelligence that prevented attacks on American soil, and disrupted networks that would have cost thousands of American lives. She paused. I have done things that will never be acknowledged, in places that officially don't exist, against enemies that the American public will never know threaten them. The silence that followed her words was profound. Every person present understood that they were in the presence of someone who had operated in the deepest shadows of American foreign policy, someone who had carried out the kind of missions that allowed the rest of them to sleep safely at night. Master Sergeant Dunham slowly came to attention. Ma'am, I formally withdraw any questions about your qualifications. One by one, the other operators followed suit. Chief Bradley, Captain Morrison, Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, all of them coming to attention in recognition of someone who had earned their respect through service they couldn't have imagined. But Commander Cross wasn't finished. There's one more thing you need to understand, he said, his voice carrying a note of warning. Lieutenant Kane's transition to open operational status comes with new challenges. She can no longer operate in complete secrecy. Her actions will be scrutinized by allies and enemies alike. She will become a target for every hostile agency that wants to prove they can eliminate America's most advanced operators. He looked directly at Kane. And she will need a team capable of supporting operations at levels that have never been attempted by conventional special operations forces. The implications hit the assembled personnel immediately. They weren't just learning about a classified program. They were being recruited for something that would push them beyond anything they had ever experienced. The question, Cross continued, is whether any of you are prepared to operate at the levels that supporting Lieutenant Kane will require. Whether you can handle missions that officially don't exist, against enemies that won't be acknowledged, in service of objectives that will never be publicly recognized. The challenge hung in the air like smoke from an explosion, and every operator present understood that their answer would determine not just their future careers, but their very survival in a world where legends walked among them. The warehouse fell into a tense silence as the assembled operators processed Commander Cross's challenge. The weight of what they were being asked to consider, missions that didn't officially exist, operations beyond conventional parameters, service alongside someone whose very existence challenged everything they thought they knew about human capability, settled over them like fog rolling in from the ocean. Master Sergeant Dunham was the first to break the silence, his weathered face showing the kind of calculation that came from 15 years of making life-or-death decisions in impossible situations. Sir, what exactly are you asking us to volunteer for? What kind of missions are we talking about? Colonel Ashford stepped forward, consulting her secure tablet before responding. Master Sergeant, the threats facing American interests have evolved beyond conventional warfare. We're dealing with adversaries who possess capabilities that match or exceed our traditional special operations forces. Terrorist networks with access to military-grade enhancement technologies. Nation-states developing operators through programs that mirror our own classified research. Criminal organizations with resources that rival small countries. She gestured toward a series of photographs that appeared on portable screens wheeled out by her assistants. 3 months ago, a team of enhanced operators, origin unknown, infiltrated a NATO facility in Germany and extracted classified research data while eliminating 12 security personnel. 2 months ago, a similar team conducted an assassination in London that required capabilities beyond anything in known special operations repertoires. Last month, intelligence intercepts suggested that multiple hostile agencies are developing their own enhancement programs. Captain Walsh took over the briefing. The conventional special operations community, exceptional as it is, lacks the capability to counter these emerging threats. We need operators who can function at enhanced levels, supported by teams that understand the unique requirements of operating beyond normal parameters. Chief Bradley stepped forward. Captain, are you saying that Lieutenant Kane would be leading operations against other enhanced operators? People with capabilities similar to her own? Chief, Commander Cross replied, I'm saying that Lieutenant Kane represents the cutting edge of American Special Operations capability, but even with her enhanced training and conditioning, she cannot operate alone against the threats we're facing. She needs a team capable of supporting operations that will push every member beyond their current limitations. The implications were staggering. They weren't just being asked to support enhanced operations, they were being recruited for a shadow war against adversaries who possessed capabilities that challenged the fundamental assumptions of modern warfare. Captain Morrison raised his hand. Sir, what kind of enhancement are we talking about for support personnel? Are you suggesting we undergo the same program that created Lieutenant Kane's capabilities? Colonel Ashford exchanged glances with her colleagues before responding. Captain, the program that developed Lieutenant Kane's capabilities requires genetic markers that occur in less than 1% of the population. Most personnel cannot achieve her level of enhancement without significant medical risks. She activated another screen showing complex medical data. However, we have developed supplementary enhancement protocols that can significantly improve human performance within safer parameters. Physical conditioning that increases strength and endurance by 30 to 40%. Cognitive enhancement that improves reaction time and decision-making speed. Medical treatments that accelerate healing and reduce recovery time from injuries. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez frowned. Ma'am, you're talking about fundamental changes to human physiology. What are the long-term effects? What are the risks? Captain Walsh's expression became serious. Sergeant, I won't lie to you. These enhancements come with risks. Accelerated physical conditioning can cause joint and muscle damage if not carefully managed. Cognitive enhancement can lead to psychological stress and sleep disorders. Medical treatments can have unpredictable interactions with existing health conditions. He paused, letting his words sink in before continuing. But I can also tell you that every operator who has completed the supplementary enhancement protocols has reported significant improvements in operational capability. They perform better, survive longer, and accomplish missions that would have been impossible under normal parameters. The assembled personnel exchanged worried glances. They were being asked to voluntarily undergo medical and physical modifications that could fundamentally alter who they were as human beings. Commander Cross seemed to sense their hesitation. I understand your concerns. This isn't a decision anyone should make lightly. You're being asked to sacrifice not just your current assignments, but potentially your long-term health, for missions that may never be acknowledged. He walked slowly through the crowd, making eye contact with individual operators. But I want you to consider something. Every person in this room volunteered for special operations knowing the risks. You accepted that you might be killed in service to your country. You accepted that you might be captured, tortured, or simply disappear into classified programs that your families would never understand. His voice grew more intense. What I'm offering you now is the chance to serve at a level that goes beyond anything you've previously experienced. To be part of operations that will determine whether America maintains its edge in a world where our traditional advantages are being eroded by adversaries who don't share our ethical constraints. Chief Bradley looked directly at Kane, who had remained silent throughout the briefing. Ma'am, what's your assessment? Can conventional operators, even enhanced ones, effectively support your level of operations? Kane considered the question for a long moment before responding. Chief, over the past 7 years, I have operated with support teams ranging from conventional special operations forces to other enhanced operators. The conventional teams were brave, skilled, and dedicated. They were also inadequate for the missions I was conducting. Her voice carried the weight of experience that none of them could match. When you're operating against adversaries who can move faster than normal human reflexes, who can process tactical information at accelerated rates, who can survive injuries that would incapacitate conventional operators, you need support personnel who can function at similar levels. She looked around the circle of faces. I've watched good operators die because they couldn't match the capabilities of our enemies. I've had to abort missions because conventional support teams couldn't keep pace with operational requirements. I've been forced to operate alone in situations where teamwork could have saved lives and accomplished objectives. Master Sergeant Dunham stepped forward. Ma'am, if we agree to this enhancement program, what kind of missions would we be conducting? Colonel Ashford activated a new screen showing global intelligence assessments. Master Sergeant, we're tracking 17 active threats that require enhanced operational response. Terrorist cells with access to biological enhancement technologies. Intelligence networks employing operators with capabilities that exceed conventional parameters. Criminal organizations conducting operations that threaten critical infrastructure. She pointed to specific geographical locations highlighted on the display. Operations in urban environments where enhanced reflexes and coordination are essential for mission success. Infiltration missions requiring physical capabilities beyond normal human parameters. Direct action operations against targets who possess defensive capabilities that conventional tactics cannot overcome. The scope of what they were being asked to undertake was overwhelming. They weren't just being recruited for difficult missions. They were being asked to join a secret war against enemies who represented evolutionary leaps in human capability. Captain Morrison looked around at his fellow operators. How many of us are you looking to recruit for this program? Commander Cross smiled grimly. Captain, based on Lieutenant Kane's assessment and our analysis of current threat levels, we need a minimum of 24 enhanced operators to provide adequate support for the missions we're facing. He gestured toward the assembled crowd. You represent the best candidates we've identified from across the special operations community. Your performance records, psychological profiles, and physical capabilities suggest you have the potential to successfully complete the enhancement program. The weight of selection, being chosen from among America's elite warriors for something even more demanding, was both flattering and terrifying. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez took a deep breath. Sir, if we volunteer for this program, what happens to our current assignments? Our families? Our normal lives? Captain Walsh's expression became sympathetic. Sergeant, that's perhaps the most difficult aspect of what we're asking. Enhanced operators cannot maintain normal military careers or conventional personal relationships. The security requirements, the physical demands, the psychological stress, they're incompatible with traditional military life. The true cost of what they were being offered was becoming clear. Not just physical risk, but the sacrifice of everything they had known about their lives and careers. The question hung in the air. Who among them was prepared to pay that price? The silence stretched for nearly a full minute as each operator grappled with the magnitude of what they were being asked to sacrifice. The afternoon sun had shifted again, casting long shadows across the facility, and the weight of the decision before them seemed to press down on the assembled personnel like a physical force. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez was the first to step forward. Her voice was steady, but those who knew her could detect the underlying tension. Sir, I need to ask about something that nobody's mentioned yet. What happens to the operators who don't survive the enhancement process? What happens to those who complete it but can't handle the psychological pressure? What's the failure rate? Captain Walsh's expression became grave. Sergeant, that's a fair question, and you deserve a complete answer. He consulted his tablet, pulling up classified medical data. Of the 47 personnel who have undergone various levels of enhancement over the past 5 years, 31 have successfully completed their programs and remain operationally effective. The mathematics hit the crowd immediately. A failure rate of over 30% was staggering by military standards. Of the 16 who didn't complete successfully, Walsh continued, 8 suffered medical complications that resulted in permanent disability. 5 experienced psychological breaks that required extended treatment and medical retirement. 2 died during the enhancement process itself. 1. He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. 1 completed the enhancement but subsequently disappeared during what appeared to be a psychological episode. Master Sergeant Dunham's voice carried the weight of someone who had sent men into impossible situations before. Sir, those are casualties rates that would be unacceptable in conventional operations. How do you justify asking personnel to accept those risks? Colonel Ashford stepped forward. Master Sergeant, how do you justify asking airborne personnel to jump out of perfectly good aircraft? How do you justify sending SEAL teams into hostile waters where they might drown or be captured? How do you justify any special operations mission where the risks exceed normal parameters? Her voice grew more intense. Every person in this room has volunteered for assignments where the casualty rates exceeded conventional operations. You've done so because the missions were critical to national security and because conventional forces couldn't accomplish the objectives. She gestured toward the intelligence displays still showing global threat assessments. The threats we're facing now exceed anything that conventional special operations can handle. The choice isn't between enhanced operations with acceptable casualties and normal operations with minimal risk. The choice is between enhanced operations with known risks and mission failure with catastrophic consequences. Chief Bradley stepped closer to the displays, studying the intelligence data. Ma'am, these threat assessments, some of these capabilities seem almost science fiction. Operators who can function without sleep for extended periods. Personnel who can survive injuries that would kill normal humans. Teams that can process tactical information at superhuman speeds. Commander Cross joined him at the display. Chief, 5 years ago, Lieutenant Kane's capabilities would have seemed like science fiction. The enhancement technologies that created her abilities were considered theoretical until they were successfully implemented. He activated a new screen showing video footage that made several operators step back in shock. This is surveillance footage from the German NATO facility breach I mentioned earlier. Watch the speed and coordination of the attacking team. The footage showed figures moving through corridors with fluid efficiency that seemed to defy human limitations. Their movements were too fast, too coordinated, too precise for normal human capability. When security personnel engaged them, the attackers responded with reflexes that made conventional training look primitive. 18 security personnel, Cross narrated as the footage played, all of them armed, trained, and in defensive positions. The attacking team, 4 individuals, eliminated all resistance in 6 minutes and 17 seconds without sustaining a single casualty. Captain Morrison stared at the screen in disbelief. Sir, that's not just enhanced training. That's something fundamentally different from normal human capability. Exactly, Captain. Which is why we need operators who can function at similar levels. Cross paused the footage. Lieutenant Kane represents our first successful attempt to match these capabilities. But one operator, regardless of her abilities, cannot counter the scope of threats we're facing. Kane spoke for the second time since the briefing began. I've engaged enemies with capabilities similar to what you just saw. Without enhanced support, those engagements are survival situations, not mission accomplishments. I can eliminate individual targets, but I cannot complete complex objectives while operating alone against enhanced opposition. Her voice carried the authority of someone who had faced these threats personally. 3 months ago, I was tasked with infiltrating a research facility where hostile enhanced operators were developing new enhancement technologies. The mission required a 6-person team. I went in alone because no conventional support team could match the operational requirements. She looked around the circle of faces. I accomplished the primary objective, the research data was destroyed. But I couldn't extract the secondary intelligence we needed because I couldn't simultaneously engage multiple enhanced opponents while conducting technical operations. A properly enhanced support team could have accomplished both objectives. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez stepped forward. Ma'am, what's your honest assessment of our chances? Not the official statistics, your personal evaluation of whether conventional operators can successfully transition to enhanced capability levels. Kane considered the question for a long moment. Sergeant, every person in this room has already demonstrated exceptional capability. You've survived selection processes that eliminate 90% of candidates. You've completed training that most people consider impossible. You've operated in environments that would break civilian personnel. She paused, studying the faces around her. But the transition to enhanced operations requires more than physical and mental toughness. It requires accepting that everything you thought you knew about human limitations is wrong. It requires rebuilding your understanding of what's possible, both for yourselves and for your enemies. Master Sergeant Dunham crossed his arms. Ma'am, what's the most difficult aspect of the enhancement process? What breaks the personnel who don't make it? Master Sergeant, the physical enhancements are painful but manageable if you have the baseline conditioning that everyone here possesses. The cognitive enhancements cause temporary disorientation, but most operators adapt within weeks. Kane's expression grew more serious. What breaks people is the psychological impact of operating beyond normal human parameters. She began walking slowly through the crowd, making eye contact with individual operators. When you can move faster than your enemies can react, when you can process tactical information at rates that allow you to predict their actions, when you can survive injuries that would have killed you before enhancement, it changes how you see yourself and how you relate to normal humans. Her voice grew quieter, more personal. You start to feel isolated from everyone who hasn't undergone enhancement. You begin to question whether you're still human in any meaningful sense. You realize that you can never return to the person you were before, even if you wanted to. The psychological implications were staggering. They weren't just being asked to risk their lives or even their physical health. They were being asked to sacrifice their fundamental sense of human identity. Chief Bradley looked directly at Kane. Ma'am, do you regret undergoing enhancement? Given what you've lost, what you've sacrificed, would you make the same choice again? Kane's answer came without hesitation. Chief, I have prevented attacks that would have killed thousands of American civilians. I have eliminated threats that conventional forces couldn't have detected, much less stopped. I have accomplished missions that have preserved American interests in regions where failure would have had catastrophic consequences. She met his gaze directly. I will never have a normal life. I will never have normal relationships. I will probably die alone in some classified operation that the American public will never know about. But I will also go to my grave knowing that I used the capabilities I was given to protect people who couldn't protect themselves. Her voice carried absolute conviction. Yes, Chief, I would make the same choice again. Every time. The weight of her words settled over the assembled personnel like a challenge. Not just to accept the risks of enhancement, but to embrace the responsibility that came with capabilities beyond normal human limits. Commander Cross stepped forward one final time. Ladies and gentlemen, you now have all the information we can provide. The choice before you is clear. Volunteer for enhancement and join operations that will push you beyond everything you thought possible, or return to your current assignments knowing that threats exist that conventional forces cannot address. He gestured toward a table that had been set up near the facility's entrance. Anyone interested in volunteering can sign preliminary paperwork. Final commitment requires additional briefings and medical evaluations, but this is your opportunity to indicate interest. The crowd began to shift as operators weighed their options. Some moved toward the table immediately, their minds made up. Others gathered in small groups, discussing the implications among themselves. A few began walking toward the exit, having decided that the costs outweighed the benefits. The selection process had begun, and within the next hour, they would know who among America's elite warriors was prepared to sacrifice everything they had been for the chance to become something unprecedented. The next 48 hours transformed Fort Meridian into something resembling a clandestine research facility more than a conventional military training base. The personnel who had signed preliminary paperwork, 27 operators out of the original crowd, found themselves subjected to medical evaluations that went far beyond anything in their previous experience. Dr. Elena Vasquez, the chief medical officer for the enhancement program, had arrived from an undisclosed location with equipment that most of the volunteers had never seen before. Her medical team conducted genetic analyses, neurological assessments, and psychological evaluations that probed depths of human capability that conventional medicine rarely explored. Master Sergeant Dunham found himself in a sterile examination room, connected to monitoring devices that tracked everything from his brain wave patterns to his cellular regeneration rates. Doc, I've been through every medical exam the Army requires, plus a few that officially don't exist. This is something entirely different. Dr. Vasquez looked up from her tablet, where she was reviewing his preliminary results. Master Sergeant, conventional medical evaluations assess whether you're healthy enough to perform known tasks. What we're doing is determining whether your biological systems can be safely modified to perform tasks that have never been attempted by human beings. She activated a display showing complex genetic data. For example, your genetic markers indicate exceptional muscle fiber composition and cardiovascular efficiency. But to survive the physical enhancement protocols, we need to know whether your nervous system can adapt to the accelerated neural pathways that enhanced coordination requires. The implications were staggering. They weren't just evaluating existing capabilities, they were analyzing whether fundamental biological systems could be altered without causing permanent damage or death. In another examination room, Staff Sergeant Rodriguez was undergoing neurological testing that measured her brain's response to stimuli at speeds that challenged human perception. "Ma'am, some of these tests seem designed to push my nervous system beyond its normal limits. Is that safe?" Dr. Vasquez's assistant, a Navy medical officer whose credentials were entirely classified, monitored the readouts carefully. "Sergeant, we're not pushing your systems beyond their limits. We're identifying what those limits actually are. Most people never approach their maximum neurological capacity because conventional training doesn't require it." He pointed to the monitoring displays. "Your brain is currently processing visual information at rates that exceed 90% of the population. With neural enhancement, we can increase that processing speed by 40 to 60%. But we need to ensure that your existing neural pathways can handle the increased data flow without causing seizures or psychological damage." The medical evaluations continued around the clock, with each volunteer subjected to testing protocols that revealed capabilities they never knew they possessed, while identifying limitations that enhancement might overcome or exacerbate. Chief Bradley's evaluation focused on his psychological resilience under extreme stress. He found himself in a sensory deprivation chamber while psychologists monitored his mental state through advanced brain imaging technology. "Chief," Dr. Martinez's voice came through speakers in the chamber, "we're going to subject you to simulated combat stress while monitoring your neurological responses. The enhancement process can amplify existing psychological traits, so we need to ensure that increased capability won't result in decreased emotional control." The simulation that followed was unlike anything Bradley had experienced in conventional training. Scenarios that combined physical threat, moral complexity, and time pressure while his brain was monitored at levels that revealed his deepest psychological responses to combat stress. "Your stress response patterns indicate exceptional emotional regulation," Dr. Martinez told him after the session concluded. "But enhancement will increase your physical capability to inflict damage while accelerating your decision-making processes. We need to ensure that enhanced speed doesn't compromise your ethical judgment." Captain Morrison's evaluation revealed genetic markers that suggested he might be capable of even more significant enhancement than the standard protocols typically achieved. Dr. Vasquez personally reviewed his results with an expression that mixed excitement with concern. "Captain, your genetic profile indicates resistance to cellular damage that occurs in less than 3% of the population. This suggests you might be eligible for advanced enhancement protocols that we've only attempted with a handful of subjects." Morrison studied the complex genetic data on her display. "Doc, what exactly does that mean in practical terms?" "It means that while most enhancement subjects achieve 30 to 40% improvements in physical capability, you might be able to achieve improvements approaching Lieutenant Kane's levels. Enhanced strength, speed, endurance, and healing rates that exceed anything we've previously accomplished with supplementary enhancement." She paused, her expression becoming serious. "It also means that the risks are proportionally higher. Advanced enhancement protocols have a failure rate approaching 50%. The potential benefits are extraordinary, but so are the potential consequences." While the medical evaluations continued, Lieutenant Kane worked with Commander Cross and the program's tactical specialists to develop training protocols that would prepare successful candidates for the realities of enhanced operations. The training facility had been modified with equipment that conventional special operations never used. Combat simulators that operated at speeds requiring enhanced reflexes to survive. Tactical scenarios that demanded processing speeds beyond normal human capability. physical challenges that would be impossible without enhanced strength and endurance. The transition from conventional to enhanced operations isn't just about improved capability, Kane explained to Cross as they reviewed the training protocols. It's about learning to think and operate in ways that normal humans can't comprehend. She activated a tactical simulation on the facility's main display. Conventional tactics assume that human reaction times, processing speeds, and physical capabilities operate within known parameters. Enhanced operations require tactics that exploit capabilities beyond those parameters while accounting for enemies who possess similar enhancements. The simulation showed combat scenarios that seemed to unfold at impossible speeds, with tactical decisions being made and executed faster than normal human perception could follow. Sir, the personnel who complete enhancement will need to learn entirely new approaches to everything from close-quarters combat to strategic planning. Their enhanced capabilities will allow them to accomplish missions that conventional forces can't attempt, but only if they can adapt their thinking to match their improved abilities. Cross studied the simulations with the expression of someone who had spent his career in special operations but was seeing possibilities he had never imagined. Lieutenant, how long does the adaptation process typically take? How long before enhanced personnel can operate effectively? That depends on the individual, sir. Some adapt to enhanced capabilities within weeks and begin operating at improved efficiency almost immediately. Others struggle for months to integrate their enhanced abilities with their tactical thinking. Kane paused the simulation. The psychological adjustment is often more challenging than the physical enhancement itself. By the end of the second day, the medical evaluations were complete. Dr. Vasquez and her team had compiled comprehensive assessments of all 27 volunteers, identifying those who could safely undergo enhancement and determining what level of modification each candidate could survive. The results were both encouraging and sobering. 19 of the 27 volunteers were cleared for standard enhancement protocols. 6 were cleared for advanced enhancement that would provide greater improvements but with increased risks. 2 were determined to be unsuitable for any level of enhancement due to genetic or psychological factors that made the process too dangerous. Commander Cross assembled the cleared candidates in the facility's main briefing room for the final decision point. The atmosphere was tense with anticipation as personnel waited to learn whether they would proceed with enhancement or return to conventional assignments. Ladies and gentlemen, Cross began, the medical evaluations are complete. Each of you has been assessed for enhancement compatibility, and individual results will be provided in private consultations. However, before we proceed to the final commitment phase, I want to ensure that everyone understands exactly what enhancement entails. He activated displays showing the enhancement facility where successful candidates would undergo the transformation process. The enhancement procedure requires 4 to 6 weeks of intensive medical treatment combined with physical and psychological conditioning. During this period, you will experience pain, disorientation, and psychological stress that exceeds anything in conventional military training. The images showed medical equipment that looked more like science fiction than conventional medicine, combined with training facilities that seemed designed to push human capabilities beyond all known limits. Upon completion, you will possess physical and mental capabilities that exceed normal human parameters. You will also be committed to operational assignments that cannot be discussed with anyone outside the program, including family members. Your enhanced capabilities will make normal military service impossible, and your knowledge of classified enhancement technologies will make civilian life equally impossible. Cross looked around the room, making eye contact with each candidate. This is your final opportunity to withdraw from consideration. Once you begin the enhancement process, there is no returning to the person you were before. The weight of finality settled over the assembled personnel like a shroud. They were being asked to make a decision that would permanently alter not just their careers, but their fundamental nature as human beings. The question was no longer whether they could survive enhancement. The medical evaluations had answered that. The question was whether they were prepared to sacrifice everything they had been for the chance to become something that had never existed before. The enhancement facility, designated as Blackwater Research Station, existed in a location that wasn't marked on any official maps. Nestled in the mountains of Montana, It appeared from the outside to be nothing more than a modest research complex studying high-altitude physiology. The reality was far more complex and infinitely more classified. 17 operators had made the final commitment to undergo enhancement. Master Sergeant Dunham, Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, Chief Bradley, and Captain Morrison were among those who had signed the irrevocable consent forms that legally transferred them from their previous commands to a program that officially didn't exist. The facility's interior revealed technology that seemed decades ahead of anything in conventional medical practice. Enhancement chambers that combined advanced pharmaceuticals with electromagnetic field therapy. Neural interface systems that could modify brain chemistry with surgical precision. Physical conditioning equipment that could stress human muscles and bones beyond their normal breaking points while monitoring every biological response in real time. Dr. Vasquez led the group through the facility during their initial orientation. Her voice professional, but tinged with the excitement of someone who was pushing the boundaries of human possibility. Enhancement occurs in 3 phases, she explained as they toured the medical wing. Phase 1 involves cellular modification through targeted pharmaceutical intervention. We introduce compounds that increase muscle fiber density, enhance cardiovascular efficiency, and accelerate neural transmission speeds. This phase takes approximately 10 days and is the most physically demanding. She gestured toward enhancement chambers that looked like sophisticated medical pods. Phase 2 focuses on neurological enhancement. We use electromagnetic therapy combined with cognitive conditioning to increase processing speeds and improve decision-making under stress. This phase is psychologically challenging as your brain adapts to processing information at accelerated rates. The neurological enhancement equipment was particularly intimidating. Arrays of sensors and electromagnetic generators that would interface directly with subjects' nervous systems while they remained conscious throughout the process. Phase 3 integrates the physical and neurological enhancements while subjecting you to stress testing that ensures your modified systems can function under operational conditions. This is where we identify any complications or incompatibilities that might compromise your effectiveness in the field. Captain Morrison studied the monitoring equipment with professional interest. Doc, what's the timeline if complications develop? What's our medical support if something goes wrong? Dr. Vasquez's expression became serious. Captain, we have medical personnel on site who specialize in enhancement-related complications. However, some aspects of what we're doing are still experimental. We're pushing human biology beyond its normal parameters, and occasionally we encounter situations that our medical knowledge can't address. She led them to a recovery wing where previous enhancement subjects were completing their programs. The personnel they encountered looked essentially normal, but there was something subtly different about their movements. A fluidity and precision that suggested capabilities beyond conventional human limits. Enhanced personnel require approximately 6 weeks to fully integrate their improved capabilities. Dr. Vasquez continued. During this period, you'll undergo training that teaches you to control and effectively utilize your enhanced abilities. Lieutenant Kane appeared in the training wing as the group toured the facility's operational areas. She was supervising advanced training exercises with personnel who had completed enhancement months earlier, and the difference between their capabilities and conventional operators was immediately apparent. The enhanced operators moved through combat scenarios with speed and coordination that seemed almost choreographed. Their reaction times, accuracy, and tactical decision-making operated at levels that conventional training couldn't achieve. The most difficult aspect of enhancement, Kane told the group as they observed the training, isn't the physical modification or even the neurological adaptation. It's learning to coordinate enhanced capabilities with teammates who are also operating beyond normal human parameters. She demonstrated with a tactical exercise that required split-second coordination between multiple enhanced operators. When everyone on a team can process information and react at accelerated speeds, tactical planning becomes exponentially more complex. You're not just coordinating individual actions, you're synchronizing enhanced capabilities that can accomplish objectives impossible for conventional forces. Master Sergeant Dunham watched the demonstration with professional fascination. Ma'am, how do enhanced teams coordinate with conventional support units? How do you integrate with personnel who can't match your operational tempo? Master Sergeant, enhanced teams typically operate independently of conventional support. The capability gap makes coordination extremely difficult and potentially dangerous for non-enhanced personnel. Kane paused the demonstration. Enhanced operations require enhanced logistics, enhanced intelligence support, and enhanced command and control systems. The implications were staggering. They weren't just joining an enhanced unit, they were becoming part of an entirely separate military capability that operated parallel to conventional forces. Commander Cross appeared as the orientation concluded, carrying sealed orders that would determine their immediate assignments upon completion of enhancement. His expression suggested developments that went beyond routine planning. "Ladies and gentlemen, your timing is unfortunately excellent," he announced, his voice carrying undertones of urgency. "Intelligence sources have identified an immediate threat that requires enhanced operational response. A terrorist network with access to enhancement technology similar to our own is planning an attack on American soil." He activated secure displays showing intelligence assessments that made several operators step back in shock. Satellite surveillance has identified a training facility in Syria where hostile enhanced operators are conducting final preparations for what appears to be a coordinated attack on multiple American targets. The intelligence imagery showed personnel moving with the same unnatural speed and coordination they had observed in Kane's training demonstrations. "The attack is scheduled to occur in approximately 8 weeks, roughly the time required for your enhancement and integration training," Cross continued. "Upon completion of your programs, you'll be deployed as Lieutenant Kane's support team for a preemptive strike against this facility." Staff Sergeant Rodriguez raised her hand. "Sir, are you saying that our first mission as enhanced operators will be against other enhanced operators? That seems like an extremely high-risk assignment for personnel who have just completed modification." Cross nodded grimly. "Sergeant, it's also our only opportunity to prevent an attack that conventional forces cannot address. The hostile enhanced operators possess capabilities that match or exceed standard enhancement protocols. Conventional special operations forces would face them at a fatal disadvantage." He gestured toward Kane. "Lieutenant Kane could potentially handle this mission alone, but the facility houses 12 enhanced hostiles plus conventional support personnel. Even with her capabilities, a solo infiltration would be essentially suicidal." The weight of what they were being asked to undertake settled over the group like a physical force. Their first mission wouldn't be a gradual introduction to enhanced operations. It would be a direct confrontation with enemies who possessed similar capabilities. Chief Bradley studied the intelligence displays with growing concern. "Sir, what's our intelligence on the hostile enhancement program? Do we know what level of modification we're facing?" "Chief, preliminary analysis suggests that hostile enhancement focuses on physical capabilities over neurological improvement. They appear to possess enhanced strength, speed, and endurance, but without the cognitive enhancement that characterizes our program." Cross paused. "However, their physical modifications may exceed our standard protocols. We're looking at opponents who could be significantly stronger and faster than our enhanced personnel." Captain Morrison stepped forward. "Sir, if the hostile enhanced operators possess superior physical capabilities, how do we achieve mission success? What's our tactical advantage?" Kane answered before Cross could respond. "Captain, physical enhancement without cognitive improvement creates operators who are essentially very dangerous animals. They're faster and stronger, but they don't process tactical information or adapt to changing conditions as effectively as cognitively enhanced personnel." She activated a tactical simulation. "Our advantage lies in superior decision-making, tactical flexibility, and coordination between team members. Physical capability without tactical intelligence is ultimately self-limiting." The simulation showed scenarios where cognitively enhanced operators used superior tactical thinking to overcome opponents with greater physical capabilities. "However," Kane continued, "the margin for error is essentially zero. Enhanced opponents who are stronger and faster than we are will exploit any tactical mistakes immediately and lethally." Commander Cross looked around the group of volunteers. "Ladies and gentlemen, you now understand exactly what you're volunteering for. Enhancement that will push your bodies and minds beyond current human limits, followed immediately by deployment against enemies who represent the most dangerous threat American forces have ever faced. He gestured toward the enhancement chambers. Anyone who wishes to reconsider their decision can withdraw now with no consequences to their current military careers. Anyone who proceeds will begin enhancement tomorrow morning. The moment hung suspended in the mountain air, heavy with implications that none of them could fully comprehend. They were being asked to volunteer for medical procedures that might kill them, followed by a mission that would almost certainly result in casualties, against enemies who possessed capabilities that challenged everything they thought they knew about warfare. The question was no longer whether they could survive enhancement, it was whether they could survive what came after. One by one, they would have to decide whether protecting America was worth sacrificing everything they had ever been. 6 months after the Syrian operation that had eliminated the hostile enhancement facility, Lieutenant Commander Zara Kane stood before a new group of candidates at Fort Meridian. The success of Operation Shadowstrike had validated the Enhanced Operations Program beyond all expectations, leading to its official recognition within the most classified levels of the Department of Defense. The 17 operators who had undergone enhancement had not only survived the process but had performed beyond the most optimistic projections. The Syrian facility had been neutralized with 0 American casualties, 12 hostile enhanced operators eliminated, and critical intelligence recovered that revealed enhancement programs in 6 other countries. Now Kane faced a new challenge, training the next generation of enhanced operators, while the program expanded to meet threats that conventional forces simply couldn't address. The current group of candidates represented the cream of America's special operations community. 57 personnel from across all service branches, each vetted through processes that had become exponentially more rigorous as the program's importance became clear to senior leadership. Ladies and gentlemen, Kane addressed the assembled candidates, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had proven enhanced operations in combat. 6 months ago, 17 operators volunteered for an experimental program that many considered scientifically impossible and tactically unnecessary. Today, that program represents America's premier response to threats that conventional military doctrine cannot address. She gestured toward displays showing global intelligence assessments that revealed the scope of enhancement programs being developed by hostile nations and terrorist organizations. What you're looking at represents a fundamental shift in modern warfare. Enhanced operators are no longer experimental curiosities, they're strategic necessities. Every major military power is developing enhancement capabilities, and several have already deployed enhanced personnel in operational roles. Master Sergeant Dunham appeared beside Kane, his bearing reflecting the confidence that came from successful integration of enhanced capabilities. The physical changes were subtle but unmistakable. Improved posture, fluid movement, and the alert awareness of someone whose nervous system operated at accelerated parameters. Master Sergeant Dunham completed enhancement 5 months ago and has since participated in 7 classified operations across 4 continents. Kane continued. His experience represents what successful enhancement can achieve when properly managed and effectively deployed. Dunham stepped forward to address the candidates. Ladies and gentlemen, I won't lie to you about what enhancement involves. The medical procedures are more painful than anything I experienced in 15 years of conventional special operations. The psychological adaptation is more challenging than any training I'd previously undergone. He paused, studying the faces before him. But I also won't lie about the results. I can accomplish missions that would have been impossible before enhancement. I can operate in environments and against threats that conventional training never prepared me for. I can protect American interests in ways that my previous capabilities simply couldn't achieve. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez joined them on the platform, her presence representing the success of female personnel in the enhancement program. The program has evolved significantly since the first group underwent enhancement, she told the candidates. Medical protocols have been refined to reduce complications. Training methods have been improved to accelerate adaptation. Support systems have been developed to help personnel integrate enhanced capabilities with their personal lives. But even as the program celebrated its successes, Kane was acutely aware of the challenges that lay ahead. Enhanced operations were expanding faster than personnel could be trained. Threats were evolving as rapidly as American capabilities improved. The psychological pressure on enhanced operators was creating retention problems that conventional military experience couldn't address. Chief Bradley approached the platform from the tactical demonstration area, where he had been supervising advanced training exercises with the facility's permanent enhanced personnel. Commander Kane, the new candidates are ready for the tactical assessment. The tactical assessment had become a critical component of candidate selection. Unlike the original group, who had been selected based on conventional special operations performance, current candidates underwent preliminary evaluation that tested their potential for enhanced operations before medical procedures began. Kane led the candidates to an observation area overlooking the tactical demonstration range. Below them, enhanced operators conducted training exercises that pushed the boundaries of what human capability could achieve. What you're about to observe represents the current state of enhanced operations, Kane explained as the exercise began. These operators completed enhancement between 2 and 4 months ago and are demonstrating integrated capabilities that conventional forces cannot match. The demonstration that followed was unlike anything the candidates had seen before. Enhanced operators moved through complex scenarios with speed and coordination that seemed to defy physical laws. Their response times, tactical decision-making, and physical capabilities operated at levels that conventional training couldn't produce. Mission parameters require infiltrating a hostile facility, eliminating enhanced opposition, recovering classified materials, and extracting within a 12-minute window, Kane narrated as the exercise unfolded. Conventional special operations would require a minimum of 6 operators and 45 minutes to accomplish the same objectives. The candidates watched in stunned silence as 4 enhanced operators accomplished the mission in 9 minutes and 37 seconds, demonstrating capabilities that rendered conventional tactical doctrine obsolete. Captain Morrison, now bearing the insignia of a newly promoted major, joined Kane at the observation platform. His enhancement had been among the most successful of the original group, achieving improvements that approached Kane's own capabilities. Major Morrison has been selected to command the program's first Enhanced Operations Unit, Kane announced to the candidates. His experience represents what enhanced personnel can achieve when they successfully integrate their capabilities with leadership responsibilities. Morrison addressed the group with the confidence of someone who had learned to command personnel operating beyond normal human parameters. Enhanced operations require leadership that understands capabilities most conventional commanders can't comprehend. When your personnel can process information and react at accelerated rates, traditional command and control methods become inadequate. He activated displays showing organizational charts for enhanced units that bore little resemblance to conventional military structure. Enhanced operations require flattened command hierarchies, accelerated decision-making processes, and tactical flexibility that conventional doctrine doesn't address. Leaders must be capable of coordinating capabilities that exceed normal human parameters while maintaining strategic focus that conventional operations don't demand. As the demonstration concluded, Commander Cross appeared for the final briefing that would determine which candidates proceeded to enhancement. His expression reflected the weight of decisions that would shape America's enhanced operations capability for years to come. Ladies and gentlemen, the program you're considering joining is no longer experimental. It's operational, expanding, and critical to American national security. Cross gestured toward the successful enhanced operators who had conducted the demonstration. These personnel represent proof that human capability can be safely and effectively enhanced to meet threats that conventional forces cannot address. He activated displays showing global threat assessments that revealed the scope of enhanced operations being conducted by multiple nations. However, the threats we're facing are evolving as rapidly as our capabilities improve. Enhanced operations require personnel who can adapt continuously to challenges that have never been encountered before. Kane stepped forward for the final address to the candidates. 6 months ago, I stood in this facility as the only enhanced operator in American service. Today, I command a unit that has proven enhanced operations in combat against the most dangerous enemies our nation has ever faced. She looked around the assembled candidates, seeing in their faces the same mixture of determination and uncertainty that she had felt months earlier. The choice before you is simple but irreversible. Volunteer for enhancement and join operations that will push you beyond everything you thought possible, or continue serving in conventional roles, while others carry the burden of protecting America against threats you cannot engage. The weight of her words settled over the candidates like a challenge. They had seen proof that enhancement worked, that it could create capabilities essential for modern warfare, that it offered opportunities to serve their country in ways that conventional military service couldn't provide. But they had also learned the costs: physical risk, psychological pressure, and permanent separation from the normal human experience. As the candidates filed out to make their final decisions, Kane remained on the platform, looking out at the training facility that had become her permanent home. She would never return to conventional military service, would never experience normal relationships or civilian life, would probably die in some classified operation that the American public would never know about. But she would also continue protecting people who couldn't protect themselves, using capabilities that allowed her to accomplish missions that no one else could attempt. Standing there in the mountain air, surrounded by personnel who had chosen to sacrifice everything they had been for the chance to become something unprecedented, Lieutenant Commander Zara Kane understood that she had found her purpose. The legend was no longer hidden. It had become the foundation for something larger. A new kind of warfare conducted by a new kind of warrior, protecting America against threats that conventional forces could never comprehend. The future of enhanced operations stretched ahead, filled with challenges and opportunities that would test the limits of human potential, while defining the next evolution of American military capability. And at the center of it all stood the operators who had volunteered to become more than human in service of preserving everything that humanity valued most. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.